Hello and welcome to Your Schools. I'm your host, Lynn Turner Fitzgerald. Joining me once again, thank you very much, is Dr. Erwin Garcia, Superintendent here at School District 2. It's been a busy time for you and your staff. The mill levy that was proposed did not pass, and so what I'd like to focus on today is moving forward. Now what happens?
So we are assessing the situation. We are listening to the community members that, number one, have reached out with feedback. I've received multiple letters, emails. I've met with county, city, community members to discuss why. People were, and even in our team, even the campaign, that by the way, I have to give credit to the campaign members because they did a phenomenal job. Not only securing funding for the campaign, but the work that they did with the community, the multiple meetings and efforts. I mean, I just give them lots of praise. But our goal right now is really assessing. So we have a couple of safety committees that we run. One is internal with principals, SROs, administrators. And we have a parent safety committee. We're meeting with that committee tomorrow. We want to hear their perspectives. So assessing is critical because, of course, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And some of the things that I've learned from the community, number one is there's a group of people that they just don't want any more taxes, period.
You're right.
It
Yes.
doesn't matter how good the proposal is, how informed it is. It's just people are tax exhausted. So that group is probably 50% of the total population of Billings, of the voters. We had about 35,000 votes this time around, which is about 40% of the entire voting pool. And then you have the group that disagreed with the language. You know, one of those concerns is mental health. They associate mental health with something, you know, some sort of agenda, some sort of woke
Right.
DEI type of approach.
Let me ask you,
Yeah.
how was the mental health phraseology used in the language?
Right. So when we talked about mental health, was always about counselors, adding counselors
sure.
to
Okay.
positions. Also, we talked about character development programs.
Okay.
And we also talked about dropout prevention, gang prevention. All of those people could see as, well, really what matters is the camera systems, is the intercom systems. We shouldn't be asking for positions.
The electronics is what
That
they
is the
wanted.
electronics, the resource more than the human capital associated with the levy. And of course, that can always be adjusted. But one thing that we cannot ignore is the behaviors that we see within our schools.
Well, it was alarming to me to read somewhere, and I can't remember where, but it was directly related to you, accredited to you, talking about the number of attacks, physical attacks on school teachers and the increase that has happened.
Yeah. So in 2016, we had 33 documented attacks to teachers or to staff on the side of the students.
This is a physical encounter.
Physical, where you have to file workers' comp, to the point where workers' comp is deemed necessary. So these are serious offenses. And we went from 33 to about 90 cases. And actually last year was 100 and something cases, 110. So the escalation, the frequency of attacks to adults from the side of children is concerning, but even more concerning is the age. Because in 2016, it was split between the three groups, elementary, middle, and high school, almost evenly.
Okay.
Now, with the challenges that the elementary students are the ones that are inflicting more of the aggression. So 86% of those documented cases came from elementary. Wow. So why? This was alarming to me when I'm looking at these elementary kids. Like, I'm looking at the videos that I get from the principals, and I'm trying to understand why would a child get a chair, smash it against the glass while the other kids are leaving the classroom, pulling the hair of the teacher, kicking the other students or the teachers, putting people at risk. But then, of course, when I listen to the city's report on crime, and when I was presented with the information that the most common crime in Billings, Montana, is domestic abuse. So domestic abuse and school violence.
So children are witnessing this.
Yeah, there should be a relationship there.
And they're modeling it, sounds like.
And then to expect that the solution to the behaviors of child beating a teacher at the school level when they're 6 or 7 years of age is to put cameras in the schools, or to bring intercom system. I can see the connection of the camera being a good way to witness what happens in the hallway, but that's not solving that problem for that child. The child will continue to carry that lack of regulation. And yes, we can support the child through our teachers and counselors, but when the frequency, the severity of the cases escalate, that's put us in a very difficult position as a system, because we're dealing with 17,000 students, and in every grade level we have 1,200 kids. So, and the number of counselors proportional to the number of students, the number of nurses, and now if we think about social workers, or if we think about mental health, if you think about mental health support, which that child that is beating up people, that child needs help. Yeah. Because the child is not only exhibiting behaviors, it's traumatized. The child is replicating behaviors that he or she got from home, and is transforming and translating those behaviors into another context at a high level of exposure, I would say. So that has to be addressed. And research says, people like to talk about research. FBI, Secret Service, and the consortium of Chicago Research, all of them agree that the key to the success of trauma is the people that are trained to help that child regulate.
Well, it sounds, okay. The child will get, say, treatment at school with a counselor. They're still going to go home to the same situation. How much counseling? You can't out-counsel their home life, right?
That is one way of looking at it. So for that, you can provide the counseling that you can provide, or you ignore the problem.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't. It's not a good idea to try. What happens to a child that attacks a teacher? What are the consequences there?
So, we have suspension, and now, because of the severity of the behaviors, now we're opening a frameworks program for elementary students. So we have frameworks. Frameworks is a discipline program, temporary, for middle schoolers and high schoolers. We currently have those programs here at the Lincoln Center. Okay. But because of the severity, now we're moving to elementary frameworks. So then, this is the piece that I hope people, when they listen to this video, that they can understand, is we're not talking about 2-3 kids. No. We're talking about a mass number of students. And of course, we can do the root cause analyses of why, and then, of course, technology is going to be one of those things, right? Technology, the use of cell phones, social media. But then how do we tackle the element of aggression at home? Substance abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction. And then other cycles, poverty, homelessness. Right. So that's really telling us that we have a community problem.
Right.
We have a societal problem that we have to address. But we cannot put all of that on the backs of the school. The school is only a element of support for the kid. The entire society has to go back. And of course, that's beyond my pay grade. So as a superintendent, I cannot sit back and witness this and not do anything. That's why we asked for the safety levy. And for me, winning was asking. I mean, bringing awareness to this issue. And was I 100% sure that we were going to pass the safety levy? Absolutely not. I mean, you read the history of voting in Yellowstone County. I went back to the levies. We failed most of them. So the possibility of failing was a high possibility. Yeah. So asking was the right thing. And the voters did the right thing. They voted based on their conscience. And it's hard to really turn that around. So what's next is assessing, evaluating our processes, looking at the language. Maybe there's something that can be trimmed. Maybe there's something that can be adjusted. And coming back to the voters probably a year from now. Of course, that has to be determined by the board. The board ultimately will have to make that decision if that's the route. If we don't get any other adjustment to the funding formula at the state level, then we will have to come back to the voters in 1 year, and perhaps with a different version of the safety levy, perhaps with no positions or a combination, something that reduces the amount.
Do you foresee layoffs?
We are actually foreseeing layoffs. Actually, we have cut about 50 positions so far. But the intent of that is not because of the safety levy. That is because we also have a budget issue that we have carried for the past 10 years. It's a budget deficit that the district has carried. So that is another problem. So the safety levy was not used to balance our budget, because when we presented how we're going to balance our budget, we always counted the safety levy failing. So we never accounted for, we're going to get this. No, we thought, worst case scenario, we're not going to pass the safety levy. We still have to address the budget. That's why we closed Washington Elementary. That's why we have cut about 50 positions. And so far, we haven't lost programs for kids, which it's tough to cut positions, but we're not taking any programs away from kids. But of course, laying off 50 people means that something is going to somehow change within the system. But we have to do it. I mean, we can't be carrying deficits perpetually. It's not a good thing for the entire district.
Well, the state funding formula is something that is way over my head. I just simply don't understand it, how it works. And I may never, I don't know. But you understand it, and you are now actively talking with legislators about possible solutions.
Yeah. So, Lynn, let me just clarify what I understand.
Okay.
What I understand, it's not so much about the funding formula, because I think there's like 2 people in the state that fully understand the funding formula.
I'm not alone then.
Yeah, you're not alone. Let me tell you, I've done my work on trying to understand the funding formula. It is the complexity and the variability. It is, in a way, a moving target somehow.
Okay.
However, I know the symptoms. I mean, I know the symptoms and I can make some inferences. So what are some of the challenges that we face as a system? Think about fine arts teacher. We have a fine arts teacher in grades 3rd through 5th. That teacher has to travel to 4 schools to be able to provide services to kids.
Wow.
We don't offer music in grades K through 3rd. We don't offer music. We can't afford it. When you think about gifted and talented programs, those programs, I am a firm advocate of those programs, because you have very talented and skilled individuals that somehow we managed to equip and train from K through fifth. But when you go to middle school, there's nothing available for those gifted kids. Why? We don't have funding.
Now, was that part of No Child Left Behind? I mean, I know we're going back a decade or so here, but it seems to me my reaction to No Child Left Behind was that some of these gifted programs got brushed away to afford the concept.
That is correct. So there is not really a funding mechanism for giftedness within our community. But giftedness should be treated as special education. You're having students that require special services.
Sure.
Being gifted, and not because I'm talking based on experience, I'm not such a gifted person, I would say, but so when someone is gifted, I mean, they see the world in a different way, and they have untapped potential that we're not maximizing by not providing these services. Right. So bottom line is there are missing opportunities. Thinking about dyslexia services, for instance, where is it that you find the most dyslexic people in groups? In the jail system, in the prison system. Oh, wow. That's when you identify dyslexic people. And that's so sad to say, but kids go through our system and they are not identified because we don't have, again, the resources. So when you are 51 in the nation for beginning teacher pay, that is Montana. It's not 50, it's 51, because the District of Columbia pays more. So 51 in the nation for beginning teacher pay, and 40 average teacher pay in the nation, okay? That should tell us that something is not right when it comes to our funding. And people say, well, you have all this money. Well, the money is spent. 95% of our budgets are spent in positions. Oh. And then you have 5%. And yes, you have transportation levies, that's for transportation. You have adult ed, that's for adult education. But then you get 5%. How do we use that 5%? Well, of course, there's an administrative cost. You have to run HR, you have to run your finances, you have to pay people. So there's a cost associated with that. And there's a cost associated with buildings.
Yeah, I was going to say maintenance has to be huge.
Maintenance, buildings, and of course, then we don't have cameras and any elementary school has camera systems. And then, some people were saying, well, we need AC units at West and Senior. Well, just to get those units is $24 million. Who's going to pay for that? Wow. So there is a problem. When the state somehow manages to keep $1 billion at the end of the cycle, and it is projected, correct me if I'm wrong once the data comes back, that the state is going to have more than $2 billion. When the Montana Constitution states that the state will provide free quality education for the students. It doesn't say the taxpayers. The taxpayers already gave their part to the state, but the state funds education 80%. That's our max. 80% is the max that the state provides for education. The other 20% comes back to the taxpayers.
So we're doing it twice.
Yeah. So the taxpayers that are already paid to the state.
Right.
So something is not adding up. When you look at per pupil cost, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, just do the math for anyone who wants to research even more. We're the lowest paying state per pupil in our region. Ours is about $13,000 per pupil. Wyoming is paying about $15,000 per pupil.
Wow.
So we are the lowest.
Is that an annual cost?
That's the annual cost of all services. So transportation, food services, all of those costs, we are the lowest paying in our region. So we have a funding formula problem.
Yeah.
And I can talk about the decrement. That's another conversation to explain, but I can explain it. We can talk about how sixth graders, for instance, when you think about sixth graders, the rate of a sixth grader in Billings Public Schools and in the state is the same as a fifth grader. Our sixth graders are being served as 7th and 8th graders. So the rate, the compensation per pupil of sixth graders should be 7th and 8th, not 4th and 5th. And that's something that the state can tweak. Only making that tweak is $2 million. If we were to make the decrement tweak, that could be between $6 to $10 million difference.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking if somehow the state is willing to make a change on the way the formula is designed, and we get an influx of $10 million, the first thing we're going to do is safety. I'm not going to go back to the voters.
Yeah.
I'm going to say we're going to use $10 million. We're going to create a funding stream for safety. We're going to get our cameras. We're going to get we're going to do these repairs that we need to make.
Right.
Another thing that I would do is building services. Put a $4 million, $5 million for buildings, so we can do these repairs, so we can expand facilities if that's the case. And of course, the other piece that we have to consider is compensation.
Yes.
I mean, our teachers, if we look at a profession, when you have to go to college for 5 years, get, in many cases, student loans, and these people are doing it because they love education, right, and they make $40,000 a year. And did you know that there are districts in Montana today where the salary for beginning teacher is $28,000? When I thought that, man, my limit, yeah.
Didn't I just see Gardner, the town of Gardner was building housing for teachers?
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Yes, that is true. I don't know if it's Gardner, but I read something, 3 districts in the nation that have really good models of building residential facilities for their teachers. Mm-hmm. And one of those is in Montana. Yeah. And it might be Gardner.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, several levies failed across the state, school levies. Does everybody have the same sort of issue? Is it tied back to the state?
It goes back to the state.
Okay.
Because now the problem in the past, the AA district, which are the largest districts, they were the ones struggling. Now the small districts are struggling too. Mm-hmm. Because going back to that example of teachers being paid $28,000 in year 1, well, who can live with that? So the districts have to come up with a compensation model that compensates beyond the $28,000. And then that puts them in a predicament when it comes to their own budgets.
Sure.
Because now they don't have the basic services, so they have to cut athletics or they have to cut services for kids. So it is now widespread. Only 35% of the levies proposed passed this time around. So, and levies is what the state said. We fund you 80%. The 20% is the taxpayer. So we're going to the taxpayers to get that 20%. Mm-hmm. But of course, the tax exhaustion in our community is so high that people are saying we're not going to do that.
Well, yeah. I mean, levies haven't been popular lately. The park levy to build the big recreation center. And personally, I'm thinking it has a lot to do with the property tax increase. That's still pretty fresh, and people are still stinging from that a little bit.
And people think, oh, property values are going up, more taxes, that means the district is getting more money. Absolutely not.
It doesn't work
because
that way.
We're capped at 80%. So the excess of that revenue goes to the state. Well, if the state is accruing money, now looking like billions of dollars, that must mean something that the state could do. And I'm understanding this is not necessarily corruption. I think that the system is designed to give the results that it's designed to give. So we're getting, the issue that we're having is because of the design of the system. So let's address the system and let's give the districts the resources that they need to function. I was just reading inflationary costs right now. From 2020 to now, and the state has given us an inflationary adjustment every year.
Okay.
So last year was a 3% adjustment. And people think 3%, so they take the millions of dollars that we receive and add the 3%. Well, that doesn't work that way. Oh. We get 80% of the 3% because we're capped at 80%. So then what happens is, we are minus 6.9% of the inflation that we've seen for the past 5 years versus the inflationary adjustment. So the money that the district receives now, the worth of that money is minus 6.9%.
So do you think you could fund a team of your best mathematics teachers and send them to Helena? It's just an idea.
Yeah.
They may even volunteer to do it.
Yes. And the challenge is the legislators are the ones that should be doing this type of work.
Right, but as you know,
Yeah.
we have a citizen legislature. These are not professional politicians. These are normal, everyday people who maybe don't have that level of knowledge or skill coming into it. I'm not saying that that's the case, but it's a big ask and it's a big explanation.
Right. So I'm thinking that we already have organizations working to lobby for a change. There's some really good organizations. The School Administrators of Montana, that's one. MAFI is another. MQEC is another group. Really good organizations advocating. I have personally done my job working with local legislators.
Right.
I mean, they're very open to listen. Even in different political parties, they still see that there is a problem. Now, what they understand is the problem might be the difference between what they see and I see, right? But I think that bringing relevance to this conversation is critical because we're getting ready for the next legislative session.
Right.
And I think that there might be some tweaks. If we get that sixth grade cost adjusted to the middle school, that's tremendous help.
Okay.
If the decrement is somehow adjusted, because we're not getting the full amount of the per pupil, we get a decremented amount. That is also a tremendous, could make a tremendous difference in the funding.
All right. Well, thank you. Good luck. We have run out of time, but I do appreciate the explanations that you give, and good luck moving forward.
Thank you, Lynn.
Dr.
Appreciate your help.
Erwin Garcia, thanks for joining us here on Your Schools. Thank you again for being with us, and we'll see you next time.